Eagles Nation, good afternoon. One of the biggest developments coming out of the Philadelphia Eagles mandatory minicamp has absolutely nothing to do with a spectacular touchdown catch or a highlight reel play. Instead, it revolves around a player who may be the most important long-term piece of Vic Fangio's defense. And the fact that he showed up to camp could be telling Eagles fans far more than many people initially realized. Jalen Carter was present at mandatory minicamp, and for Eagles fans, that should be viewed as a major positive sign. Carter has already established himself as one of the premier defensive talents in the NFL, earning second-team All-Pro honors in 2024. Even while battling through significant shoulder issues last season, he remained one of the most disruptive defensive forces on the field whenever he was healthy enough to play. What makes his presence at minicamp so important is the timing. Carter is now eligible for a contract extension, and around the league, situations like this can sometimes become complicated. Star players often use their leverage during contract negotiations, especially when they know they are due for a massive payday. Yet Carter was on the practice field with his teammates instead of creating any distractions. That speaks volumes about where both sides appear to stand. The Eagles clearly view Carter as one of the foundational pillars of their organization moving forward. Throughout various trade rumors involving elite defensive players around the NFL, Carter's name has never been part of those discussions. Philadelphia has consistently shown that they view him as a centerpiece of their future, and all indications suggest they intend to reward him accordingly. Considering the level of production Carter has already displayed at such a young age, it would not be surprising to see him become one of the highest paid defensive tackles in football when that new contract eventually arrives. His importance becomes even more obvious when looking at the overall state of the Eagles' defense. Over the last 2 seasons, Philadelphia has assembled one of the most exciting young defensive cores in the NFL. Carter is joined by fellow defensive tackle Jordan Davis, who recently secured his own contract extension. Then there are emerging stars like Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Nolan Smith, Moro Ojomo, Zach Bond, and Jonathan Gannon's former defensive unit has now evolved into a group loaded with young talent that continues to grow under Vic Fangio's leadership. What is perhaps most impressive is how the Eagles have built this defense while spending significantly less money than many of their competitors. Philadelphia currently ranks near the bottom of the league in defensive spending, yet the production on the field has remained among the best in football. That is exactly what happens when a team drafts well. The Eagles have consistently invested in young talent and developed those players into major contributors before having to commit massive contracts. It creates flexibility, allows the front office to build a complete roster, and gives Howie Roseman options that many organizations simply do not have. Of course, that financial advantage will not last forever. Eventually, players like Jalen Carter will need new contracts. Eventually, some of these young stars will command top-of-the-market deals. But for now, Philadelphia is enjoying the benefits of excellent drafting and player development. Meanwhile, mandatory minicamp also provided a glimpse into several other important storylines developing around the roster. Jordan Davis was back on the field following his contract extension, continuing to work as part of what could become one of the most dominant defensive fronts in football. Saquon Barkley was participating in ball security drills, while Jalen Hurts was taking snaps under center as the offense continues adjusting to its evolving scheme. There was also considerable attention surrounding the secondary. Riq Woolen continues to generate buzz throughout the spring, and expectations for him appear to be growing every week. Woolen's combination of size, speed, and ball skills has consistently stood out throughout organized team activities and now during mandatory minicamp. The excitement surrounding Woolen reached another level when discussions began about just how good this Eagles secondary could become. According to Woolen, he believes Philadelphia has the potential to possess the best secondary in the entire NFL. That is an enormous statement. What's even more interesting is that former Eagles cornerback Darius Slay publicly agreed with that assessment, expressing confidence that this group can reach exactly that level. When you look at the talent involved, it's not difficult to understand why those expectations exist. Quinion Mitchell continues to establish himself as one of the league's most promising young defensive backs, while Woolen's arrival adds another intriguing piece to the puzzle. Combined with the pass rush that Philadelphia expects to generate, opposing quarterbacks could have an extremely difficult time attacking this defense. And while the defense continues attracting much of the attention, there are also significant developments taking place on the offensive side of the ball that could reshape the Eagles heading into the upcoming season. Could the biggest offensive transformation in Philadelphia actually come from a completely new system that veteran leaders like Lane Johnson have been waiting years to experience? The offensive side of the football may end up telling one of the most fascinating stories of the Eagles' entire offseason because, for the first time in a long time, some of the team's veteran leaders are preparing to operate in a system that feels completely different from what they have experienced throughout much of their careers. Lane Johnson, entering his 14th season in Philadelphia, spoke extensively about the new offense during minicamp, and his comments immediately caught attention. For years, Johnson has been regarded as one of the greatest right tackles in NFL history and one of the best players ever to wear an Eagles uniform. Yet despite everything he has accomplished, he admitted that this is a system he has admired from afar for a very long time. The new offensive structure, which draws influences from the Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, is something Johnson has always wanted to experience firsthand. Now, after more than a decade in Philadelphia, he finally gets that opportunity. That excitement was clear when he discussed the potential of the scheme. Johnson was careful not to make any bold guarantees, but he openly suggested that this offense could eventually become more productive than what Eagles fans witnessed last season. That is a significant statement considering the level of talent Philadelphia already possesses. What makes the system especially intriguing is how it could help some veteran players continue performing at a high level. Johnson explained that in previous schemes, he often found himself isolated in pass protection without consistent guard assistance. In this offense, however, the blocking concepts create more opportunities for support from interior linemen. As players get older, those subtle differences can become extremely valuable over the course of a long NFL season. For Eagles fans, that could be a major development. Keeping Lane Johnson fresh, healthy, and effective remains one of the most important factors for the success of this football team. Even after all these years, he continues to play at an elite level, and any system that can maximize his strengths while reducing wear and tear deserves attention. Johnson also reflected on the surprising departure of longtime offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland. After more than a decade of remarkable success, the change understandably caught many people off guard. Johnson acknowledged that the situation was shocking, but he also recognized the reality of professional football. Business decisions are part of the NFL, even when they involve respected figures who have been integral to an organization for years. The veteran tackle also revealed additional details regarding the foot injury that affected him last season. After suffering injuries against both Green Bay and Detroit, he worked tirelessly in an effort to return for the playoffs. However, persistent swelling ultimately prevented him from getting back onto the field when the Eagles needed him most. That context makes his health entering this season even more important. At the same time, another offensive storyline continues to develop in the backfield. Tank Bigsby has reportedly looked outstanding throughout spring practices. While nobody expects him to challenge Saquon Barkley for the starting role, his running style appears to fit naturally within the principles of this new offense. Bigsby is known as a decisive one-cut runner, a trait that often thrives in outside zone concepts. Barkley remains the explosive game-changing star capable of turning any carry into a touchdown, but having another effective option could help balance the workload throughout the season. The Eagles may have discovered a valuable complement to Barkley, and if Bigsby continues building momentum, his role could become larger than many people anticipate. Of course, not every storyline emerging from minicamp has been entirely positive. One of the concerns involves rookie receiver My Lemon, who once again missed practice because of a hamstring injury. He was also unavailable during open OTA sessions, creating a situation where valuable developmental reps continue slipping away. The Eagles expect him to be ready for training camp, which is certainly encouraging. Still, anytime a young player misses practice opportunities, it creates challenges. The learning curve in the NFL is already steep. Missing on-field repetitions only makes that adjustment process more difficult. Philadelphia has experienced similar situations before, with young players needing time to catch up after missing portions of off-season work. The organization remains optimistic, but they would undoubtedly prefer to have every young contributor available during these important installation periods. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts experienced what many coaches would probably describe as a normal learning day within a new offensive system. There were flashes of brilliance. At one point, Hurts escaped pressure, rolled outside the pocket, avoided what would have been a sack, and delivered a deep pass downfield to E.J. Jenkins. Plays like that remind everyone why Hurts remains one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in football when improvisation becomes necessary. However, there were also some missed throws and moments where timing appeared inconsistent. That should not be viewed as cause for alarm. Learning a complex offense takes time, especially during off-season practices when players are still processing new terminology, responsibilities, and adjustments. Some growing pains are expected, and the coaching staff likely understands that development will continue throughout training camp and possibly even into the regular season. Still, another unexpected name started generating attention during minicamp, and his rise could create one of the most surprising roster battles on the entire team. Chance Campbell, a linebacker who spent time on the practice squad, found himself working with the first-team defense alongside Zach Bond. With Jahad Campbell continuing his recovery from a shoulder injury, Chance Campbell has been given an opportunity that few may have predicted earlier in the offseason. And if he continues taking advantage of those opportunities, could he force his way onto the final 53-man roster and become one of the biggest surprises of Eagles training camp? Chance Campbell's emergence is especially interesting because it highlights just how competitive this Eagles roster has become under Howie Roseman's leadership. Every year, Philadelphia seems to uncover contributors from unexpected places, and Campbell is suddenly putting himself into that conversation. During minicamp, he was running with the first-team defense next to Zach Bond, while Jahad Campbell continued working through his recovery process. Coaches clearly wanted to evaluate what Chance Campbell could do when placed alongside the starters, and opportunities like that are rarely handed out by accident. The coaching staff has reportedly been hearing positive things about him for quite some time. In fact, according to discussions around the team last season, multiple players viewed him as one of the most talented members of the practice squad. Now he finally has a chance to prove that reputation was deserved. If he continues stacking strong practices together throughout training camp, he could become one of the most intriguing underdog stories on the roster. Another situation worth monitoring involves edge rusher Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. The former first-round pick has been absent from both OTAs and mandatory minicamp. There has been no indication regarding the specific reason for his absence, but it has certainly become a notable storyline considering how valuable pass rush depth can be over the course of a season. Philadelphia has invested heavily in building a defensive front capable of overwhelming opposing offenses, and adding another experienced edge defender could strengthen that group even further. For now, however, his absence remains something to keep an eye on as the Eagles move closer to training camp. Meanwhile, one of the quieter but potentially important developments from minicamp came from new offensive line coach Chris Cooper. His vision